Non-ECC, the heart of your system.
What is up, guys? This is Luke Hill for Kicker, and this is the Thermaltake ToughRAM RGB memory. So Thermaltake first launched this memory back in Computex in May. That's when we first saw it announced. And the modules that we have on offer today are DDR4 3600MHz CL18 memory modules. So the ToughRAM RGB modules feature support for all of the main RGB lighting suites from the motherboard vendors, so Asus Aorra, Gigabyte RGB Fusion, MSI Mystic Light Sync, and ASRock Polychrome RGB. And as you can see, we've got them installed here on the test bench on the Asus X570E Gaming, and they're working fine in RGB mode. Notably, Thermaltake also provides support for Amazon Alexa and Razer Chroma Sync, so you get more than just the bare motherboard sync tools available. Thermaltake gives you two software suites with the RGB memory. You have ToughRAM RGB, which is the primary software you should use to control the memory, and that features a bunch of different lighting modes and some cool features actually, like changing the color to red when a certain memory utilization is reached. And then you also get TTRGB Plus, which allows the memory to sit within the Thermaltake synchronization ecosystem for other components. If we look at the memory modules specifically, we've got this black aluminium heat spreader, and that's a brushed aluminium. It feels really premium. It looks a lot like the Trident ZRGB is, and as we can see for the overall styling, they look a lot like the G-Skill modules. So you've got two individual notches here which feature a mirrored metal covering, so very reflective, and that's good if you want to reflect some of the RGB lighting within your system, or perhaps some of the other components that you're really interested in. Obviously, the heat spreader is also used for dissipating heat away from the memory modules, but that's not really a big deal when you're running 1.35 volts DDR4. It just doesn't get all that hot. The overall module height is just under 50mm, so you certainly will have to watch out for incompatibility with large CPU coolers, specifically air coolers that overhang the memory module sockets. This is a bit annoying, to be honest. I don't understand still why memory vendors insist upon using taller than average sticks, which just reduce their compatibility with other hardware. There's absolutely no need, and primarily the reason that these modules are taller is because of the RGB housing. It's a little bit pointless in my opinion, but of course if you want RGB then perhaps you're happy to deal with that compromise. Focusing specifically on the RGB design, through the control software there are 5 zones which can be controlled individually. This allows for the colour to be relatively smooth and even. Importantly, it's worth noting that there are no external cables to use with the RGB implementation, so it's all run through the synchronization system with the motherboard. You don't need to plug into an RGB header, which is a clear positive. The specific kit that we're testing is DDR4 3600, and Thermaltake advertises this on its product page and on the retailer product page as a C18, but doesn't give any more details than C18. And that's really quite annoying actually, because when we installed these modules and when we looked at the packaging specifically, which of course if you're buying online you will not be able to do, you can see that these are actually 18, 22, 22, 42. So as far as DDR4 3600 goes, that's very entry-level timing for that frequency. Whereas sometimes we see maybe 18, 19, 19 timings for higher end kits at DDR4 3600. So the fact that Thermaltake doesn't make this clear is pretty frustrating and could confuse some buyers who are really specifically interested in the tighter latencies from higher end modules than this. Obviously, being high speed overclocked DDR4, this operates at 1.35 volts, and according to CPU-Z, the specific memory modules that are used are SK Hynix modules, so not Samsung BDI that I know a lot of people still gravitate towards, but high speed SK Hynix binned ICs. So here we have the ToughRAM RGB software, and the first thing that you'll notice is that you get this information screen when you first launch the software, and this tells you things such as the number of modules, how much load there is on the module, so how much memory you're using basically, frequency, timings, temperature, that's good to see, and then you can cycle between the modules to see if they're different temperature, which is not the case here. If we jump on down to the lighting mode of the TTRGB Plus, what you will see is a bunch of profiles, and you will see a preview of the current RGB mode. And this preview is really good. I really like that because it updates in real time, as you can see. So you can see what your RAM modules are going to do before you go applying the specific mode. And then let's drop down and change a different one. So let's go on static. I'm going to go into static mode, click apply, and then you can see the modules will change into a multicolored static mode. You do single color, obviously you can do multicolor if you prefer. So drop down for single color or drop down for RGB mode. I've just ruined the RGB mode because I've went through and changed them all to yellow. Whoops. So I'm just going to click back to default, apply that, works a charm. I particularly like this wave mode personally. So obviously you can have a static RGB mode if you like. If we go to one of the moving modes, so let's go to cross for some reason, gravitate towards that. So you can see the bouncing mode, and then you can go down and you can change the speed. So let's go extreme, why not? Wow, that really is extreme. So you can move the speed pretty fast, to say the least. If we jump up to another mode and see rain, let's go extreme rain. Now, I'm from Wales, so I love extreme rain, because that's all I ever get. And as it's approaching bonfire night here in the UK, then let's check out the fireworks mode. Now the good thing is you can save a bunch of profiles. So if you have a specific profile you prefer for work maybe, and then one for when you're gaming or when your friends are around, then you can have these different profiles. So for example, we've got gaming modes and movie modes, which is good to see. And I'm going to go for something less aggressive on the speed. So you've got a standard pulsing mode, and I do like the colors, to be honest. And you know, if you've messed up your profiles so much that you can't remember what you did, you can just click this default mode and it goes back to the default version instead of multicolors, for example. And then if you simply are bored of RGB, or you're trying to do some work or keep the lights low, you can click this off color mode, and then it just shuts off all the modules, RGB lighting. So TT RGB Plus is the control hub software where you can control your multiple Thermaltake devices. We don't have any other Thermaltake devices connected, so again, this error message with the fan controller. Now supposedly you can turn off all of these fans to be able to get rid of this message, but I've tested this once before and it didn't work, so for now you'll just have to ignore that. But obviously if you've got a Thermaltake CPU cooler or set of fans, then you're not going to have to worry about that. So you jump along to the RGB mode. What you can see is you can toggle between sync on and sync off, and this will sync up with your other Thermaltake hardware. If we jump into our motherboard software, so in this case we're using an Asus motherboard, so this is Aura Sync, and we turn on the sync for the RGB memory, what we can see is that we can go through the specific color modes and we can set them. So if we switch this up to red, because why not, select apply, and then the RAM will update. So clearly there's a cool feature in Aura Sync where you can specify the areas just as you can with the Thermaltake RGB software. So if you have all your devices running through Aura Sync, if you've got a heavily RGB motherboard and graphics card perhaps, then it's good that you can control the individual lighting zones on your RGB RAM also. So our test system consists of the AMD Ryzen 9 3900X 12-core CPU, cooled by a Corsair H100X 240mm AIO. We use a Gigabyte Aorus RTX 2080 Ti Extreme, which is an absolute beast of a graphics card for pixel pushing duties. Power is handled by the absolutely overkill and highly efficient Seasonic Prime Titanium 1000 watt power supply, and we're using Windows 10 1903 with the latest updates and AMD power profiles. 7-zip highlights solid performance for the 3600MHz Thermaltake ToughRAM RGB modules. The decompressing rating is a smidgen faster than 3200C14 competition, while it's relatively close in performance to G.Skill's 3600MHz Trident Z Royal with tighter timings. Cinebench R15 actually puts the ToughRAM RGB into first place in our testing, albeit by a single point over G.Skill's tighter Trident Z Royal. Realistically, this performance difference is within margin of error. However, it is positive to see Thermaltake's SK Hynix-based modules keeping pace with G.Skill's Samsung BDI-based competitors. Another performance draw is shown between the two 3600MHz kits, this time in Cinebench R20. Clearly, Cinebench R20 does not show performance loss with the looser timings of Thermaltake's ToughRAM RGB versus the G.Skill alternatives. Unsurprisingly, each memory kit falls into place in ADA memory bandwidth testing. Thermaltake's 3600MHz ToughRAM RGB kit sits middle of the pack in our testing, with the tighter G.Skill 3600MHz kit hitting top spot. Memory bandwidth in Sysoft Sandra also has the ToughRAM RGB stick sitting closer to the performance of G.Skill's slower competitor. A bandwidth of just below 37GB per second is solid, but the tighter 3600MHz G.Skill kit is able to hit 1.5GB per second higher. There's little between all three of the kits in 3D Mark's TimeSpy CPU score. G.Skill's 3200C14 Flare X more or less ties with the 3600MHz ToughRAM modules, while the tighter Trident Z Royal sticks open up a minor performance lead. As was the case with 3D Mark, There's very little between each kit in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The ToughRAM RGB 3600MHz kit slots into the middle of our chart by beating out 3200MHz C14 Flare X by a single FPS on average, whilst falling behind 3600MHz C16 Trident Z Royal by 1 FPS on the minimum. Any of these kits will be perfectly adequate for gaming usage in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. With the Thermaltake ToughRAM RGB, especially in the DDR4 3600MHz version that we have reviewed, you get overall solid performance from the memory modules, and you get a very good aesthetic that will specifically tend to a lot of people's preferred tastes. Personally, I like the appearance of the brushed aluminium heat spreaders, especially in the dark form, and I like these two reflective metal strips. They add nice touches, they're going to glow the LED a bit more, and they're going to reflect some of the lighting around your case. And on that topic, I think the RGB lighting is very good. It's very smooth, it's clean, it's very high frequency and responsive if you're using some of the variable or the move-in modes. I think Thermaltake has done a really good job with the RGB here. Software compatibility is clearly a strength for the Thermaltake ToughRAM RGB modules. You get support for all of the main motherboard vendor RGB solutions and synchronization through there. You also get two specific packages from Thermaltake themselves. So the ToughRAM RGB features 25 control modes, and you can individually zone into 5 specific zones for the addressable LEDs, so that's really good. And then you can fit it into your Thermaltake synchronization system with TT RGB+. And then if you're inclined, you can also use Amazon Alexa and, perhaps more relevant, Razer Chroma Sync also. While the timings are certainly loose for a DDR4 3600MHz kit, I mean, the timings of 18, 22, 22, 42 are very entry level for this frequency. They're not higher bin timings or tighter timings that we see on some of the higher end modules. And that's a little bit disappointing, but the performance in our testing wasn't hugely detrimented by that fact. We still see slightly better performance than the 3200 C14 modules in our testing, but 3600 C16 is noticeably faster. Given the £140 asking price in the UK for the DDR4 3600 modules, I'm actually quite surprised we get such loose timings. At this price range from Corsair with the Vengeance RGB Pro or with the G-Skill Trident Z, you'd be expecting probably 18, 19, 19 or 17, 18, 18 timings at this price point. So Thermaltake is certainly charging a price premium for its software package and its RGB control there versus some of the really tough contenders with good software packages and good RGB interfaces. Equally so, if you look at the timings and the frequency of the competing modules, so again, Vengeance RGB Pro or G-Skill Trident Z or Trident Z Neo, then the pricing is more towards slightly sub 100, so about £95 in Corsair's case and about £110 or £115 in G-Skill's case, and that will get you the same frequency with the same timings. So again, Thermaltake is charging a very heavy premium for the ability to fit this into the synchronization through TTRGB+ and for the specific design of its memory modules. So basically, good modules overall. You get a good RGB lighting mode. I like the overall design. The performance was perfectly fine, but the timings are undeniably loose given the price point. I think this is one that's worth considering if you specifically want the Thermaltake modules to fit inside the synchronization with your other Thermaltake hardware. Otherwise, the pricing does need to come down a bit. So I've been Luke Hill for Kit Guru. Thank you for watching this review. Make sure you let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you like this video, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. If you want to see more details and more charts and more analysis, head on over to the written review on the Kit Guru website. And if you want to support what we do, then head on over to our Patreon page and support us that way. Or check out our cool merchandise in the merch store. See you next time.